Ah, God. Does this work? Testing. 1, 2, 3. Y'all hear me? Hello. Hello, chat. From the other side of the world. Scuffed. Yeah, man. So I'm using a laptop that I'm traveling with. It's been challenging to figure out how to stream, but here we are, chat. Hope y'all are doing well. How's everybody doing today? So welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist theoretically practicing in Boston, Massachusetts. Just a reminder that everything we discuss on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only. Oh my god, that chat box is... This widget is in the wrong place. Holy. There we go. Let's see if that's better. And so, yeah, sorry, resolutions and stuff are messed up. So welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston. Just a reminder that everything we discuss today on stream is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. That's actually kind of especially important just because we've got a couple of things today that, I do think that people should consider getting mental health evaluations. So if you guys kind of fall into those categories, you should really think about seeing a licensed mental health professional for an evaluation. So I'm in an undisclosed location in Europe. I cannot disclose that or divulge that at the moment. So we've got a couple of quick announcements. So we've got coaching. We've got about less than 100 group coaching spots left. Remember that group coaching is going to be like more of a skills building kind of approach. So if you guys are interested in like goal setting and accountability and things like that, if y'all are interested in learning how to inquire, how to listen, like how to be active listeners, how to explore not only your own feelings but helping other people explore their feelings. If you want the opportunity for other people to help you kind of figure out how you feel and stuff like that, then I'm not kidnapped. If you guys are interested in that, then by all means check out group coaching. Let's see what else. Yeah, so the in other news, I think the main thing is just that hold on. Okay. So just kind of a reminder that, for the next couple of weeks, things are going to be a little bit strange in terms of our stream times. We probably will be streaming at this time on Friday. And then after that, I'm not sure if and when we're going to stream for the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned to our Twitter and Instagram. Otherwise, Dr. K may just be random kind of vibing streaming, okay? Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think you guys... I won't be interviewing anyone. Don't worry about that. So, let's get started. Let me try to figure this out. Oh my god, scuffed. Okay. So, we've got a couple of good questions today. So I'm going to have to transition and then Alt-Tab. So can y'all see this? I can't see you anymore. All right. So this is our first subreddit post today. I'm constantly telling lies and I want to stop. Is this something I can go to a therapist with? As the title says, I keep telling lies in the conversations I have. It doesn't matter if I talk to my girlfriend, my parents, or a stranger I just met. The thing frustrating me is that it's not like I will lie to get out of uncomfortable situations. It's completely unnecessary and happens almost on autopilot. As far as I can remember, I lied a lot since I was a kid and never told anybody about it. I managed to tell my girlfriend that I lied to her last week and she was very kind and understanding. After that, I somewhat naively thought that I would stop telling lies, period, but I keep on telling lies. Now, my question is if this is something a therapist can help out with. Or should I just try to tell more people about this and give people the chance to call me out if something sounds off? I'm open for suggestions how to work on myself and hope some of you maybe have overcome something similar and can give me advice. So let's kind of think about this, okay? So this is a person who has trouble telling the truth. It seems like they've been lying from a young age. It also seems like the lying has become quite habitual at this point, and also that the lie doesn't necessarily like serve any purpose. So what we're going to try to do is to understand, like, I'm going to tell you all a little bit about lying, and then the person has a question, should I see a therapist? So there are some cases where therapists can help with like compulsive lying or pathologic lying. But before we kind of get to that, we're going to sort of take this in kind of like the clinical approach and the non-clinical approach. So this is an approach that I like a lot. It's an approach that we take with Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health. So in Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health, what we try to do is like look at depression and look at it from like a mental illness angle, and also just like a mental perspective in general. So, what is mental illness? Like, what is major depressive disorder versus like, why do people get depressed? And like, is that more of an existential depression or like not enjoying life? So we're going to take the same approach with lying. So how can we understand lying kind of like not as a mental illness, but as like, why do people lie and like what's going on when people lie? And then secondly, we're going to explore a little bit about like lying as it relates to particular diagnoses, and kind of see and share some of the features of those diagnoses to help y'all figure out, okay, like if I'm a compulsive liar, like which way do I need to go? Okay. So the first thing is that for most human beings, lying is all about controlling the reactions of others. So if you ask people like, why do you lie? Most people will lie to control the behavior of others, right? So like if I'm lying to avoid consequences, there's a particular behavior or impression that someone else has which I want to avoid. So like lying is essentially, like for most people and within the normal variation, is like all about control. So I won't, for example, if you look at people who are having affairs, right? So they're going to lie to their spouse to avoid the consequences of, whatever the affair would cause. If you look at, kids who lie to their parents about how much they play games, it's all to kind of like avoid the consequences of like what the parent would do. And even sometimes, like if you look at like lies told for good reasons, it's still about control, right? So if I've had situations where you'll have teenagers that, for example, are given bad diagnoses, and the whole family will sort of insist on lying to them about like what the prognosis is. Like if you have like a teenager who's diagnosed with cancer, I'm not trying to apply a moral judgment to that about whether that's the right decision or wrong decision. But the idea behind lying is that if I give this person this information, they're going to react in a certain way, and I'm trying to control their behavior. So a lot of times what I think is important if you're lying for the sake of control is to think long and hard about like, is it your right to control that kind of behavior in someone? Like it may negatively affect you if they know about it, right? But what you're essentially doing in that situation is taking away someone else's right to make an informed decision. And people do that. It happens all the time. But I think that if you want to really surrender control, surrendering control can be quite liberating in life. So when I work with a lot of people who lie, like I will try to encourage them to tell the truth. There's also a video all about satya or truthfulness in the meditation guide. And like in that video, it talks a lot about how like being honest is like an immense source of strength. I know it sounds kind of weird, but generally speaking, when people start telling the truth, like their life just gets better in any number of ways. It may get worse kind of in the short term, like as you start to like, as people uncover your lies, you're kind of like opening yourself up to some kind of fallout. But generally speaking, like all of that fallout is not due to you not telling the truth. It's the fallout from you lying in the first place. And once you sort of start telling the truth, it can actually be like quite liberating, because then you kind of don't have to worry about like, the consequences of things. I know it sounds kind of weird. And then if you really commit to telling the truth, then there's another secret OP aspect of that, which is that if you commit to telling the truth, then your behavior will change, right? So like I want you guys to imagine a scenario in which it's like physiologically impossible for you to lie. How would your behaviors change if you can no longer lie to cover them up? And so like generally speaking, for like 99% of people that I know, if they're not able to lie anymore, their behaviors will change in a very positive way. So if you can kind of commit to telling the truth, This is, I think, what the yogis kind of figured out, is that like if you commit to telling the truth, your behaviors will change in a way that generally speaking is positive. So it's kind of interesting to think about. But from a kind of non-clinical perspective, if we look at why human beings lie, I think generally speaking, it's about control. I think there's a lot of, value to surrendering control over your life. I know that sounds kind of weird, but, to focus yourself on actions as opposed to outcomes, right? I'm not going to stress about getting an A or a B or a C on a test. What I'm going to stress about is like studying every day. Like I'm going to devote myself to action. And a lot of people will ask themselves, like we'll get this question a lot, like how do I let go of outcomes and focus on the action? It's through actually things like this, through truthfulness, through, like not lying and things like that. If you do find yourself lying a lot and you want to try to control that behavior, I think a big question that you need to ask yourself is like, what am I trying to control in other people through lying? And as you explore that, you may discover, for example, that you're ashamed of yourself. And so you tell lies because you don't want to expose your shame to someone else. The problem with that is that like you can lie about your shame all day long and not expose it, but it doesn't change the fact that you're like ashamed in the first place. It doesn't actually drive you to positive behavior in which you no longer need to feel ashamed. So this is sort of the spiritual value of truthfulness, is that like if you let people judge you for being ashamed, it's actually going to be a motivator in the right direction for you to start constructing a life that you're no longer ashamed of. If you can't actually lie about your alcohol problem and you're not going to lie to your spouse, what it actually drives you to do, it gives you like more motivation to stay sober. So it's kind of interesting, but I think a lot of times lying actually hamstrings us and keeps us stuck in our current situation. So there's more about this in Dr. K's guide. If you like watch the Satya video, I kind of talk about the spiritual perspective on truthfulness and explain some of these things. So that's kind of a non-clinical perspective. So from a clinical perspective, people have looked at lying in a couple of different dimensions. So for example, some people have done studies on pathologic lying and sociopaths. So this is an antisocial personality disorder. The problem with a lot of these studies is that they'll study criminal populations. So there's a decent chance that, you're getting like a very narrow percentage of the population. So if you look at sociopaths, and like studies on sociopaths often involve criminals, but like that's ignoring all of the sociopaths who like didn't get caught or aren't stupid enough to like commit crimes. So I actually think that there's a big methodological flaw in using criminality to study sociopathy, because what you're doing is you're taking the worst people or even the stupidest sociopaths and you're using them to generalize things about other sociopaths. So I want to say that like 30 to 40% of the people that I've worked with are probably like test highly on the sociopathy scale, and my experience with them has been, generally speaking, like really positive. So I think that there are a lot of these traits that we kind of think of as like these people are evil, but there's a lot to be learned about studying like a healthy, normal population who has these traits. So there is a correlation though with sociopathy and kind of like compulsive lying. The next two things that we're going to talk about, which if you really look at mental illnesses that lead to lying, right? So this is a situation where you have like somewhat of an independent process that is going on in your mind or your brain that causes you to engage in a behavior. And there are two major diagnoses that I think of when people come in or like compulsively lying. One is addiction and one is OCD. So if you look at some kind of papers on behavioral addictions, what they'll kind of describe is this process of like kind of feeling some kind of like intense tension, like an internal sense of tension, followed by relief. So if you look at a lot of behavioral addictions like pathologic gambling, for example, or video game addiction, people will like feel deeply, deeply uncomfortable in their own skin, and it kind of like grows and grows and grows until like they're kind of feel like they're going out of their mind, and then they engage in the behavior, and then like there's like an immense feeling of like relief afterward. And so if you're trying to figure out like whether a therapist is appropriate, I'd say to begin with just go ahead and see one, because you're not really able to make a diagnosis. But what I think of as a therapist is, does this person have this like kind of internal sense of like building tension that the only way they can relieve is by like telling a lie. So from this person, the post that we read, for example, it seems like this person tells lies without any kind of gain. So it makes me think there's more to this than just trying to control other people. And so this kind of pattern of like impulsive drive or building tension followed by relief is sometimes an indicator of a behavioral addiction. So if what I would encourage all of y'all to do is like sit down if you're kind of a compulsive liar and think a little bit about like what happens within you as you go through the process of lying. Are you trying to control someone? Are you trying to shape someone's image of you? Then that may not be something that's necessarily clinical, although it still could be. Right? I kind of think about that a little bit more as like shame and ego and stuff like that. Do you have this kind of like unnatural feeling of tension that builds followed by relief? If so, then that kind of makes me think a little bit more in the direction of a behavioral addiction. And so, you should definitely consider seeing a therapist if that's your experience of it. The third thing to kind of think about is OCD spectrum illnesses. So remember that OCD involves obsessions and compulsions, and obsessions are literally thoughts and compulsions are behaviors. So if you kind of look at, compulsive lying, what it kind of fits into an OCD kind of pattern as well. So some people have hypothesized in the psychiatric literature that compulsive lying is a manifestation of OCD. So literally what happens is you'll have some kind of thought that is like, I need to tell a lie, I need to tell someone something completely ridiculous. Doesn't really make any sense, doesn't really help you at all. And a big thing about obsessions is that they're kind of like, they don't make sense. And we'll talk about this in a second. But a lot of times like the obsession is sort of like just this intrusive thought that like, you just have to like, you feel like doing it. And then if you engage in the behavior, it also creates a sense of relief, right? So this maps a little bit onto a similarity between like behavioral addictions. And this is why people have sort of like hypothesized that it's either or. But it's literally like a thought followed by a behavior. And if you're trapped in sort of a cycle of thoughts followed by behaviors, and this can be all kinds of things. It can be like stuff like, the traditional ones are, I have to check the light switch like 6 times before I leave. Otherwise, like I'll get into a car crash. Or I need to repetitively check the stove. I need to check it 6 times to make sure that, it's not secretly like leaking gas or something like that. So there's some kind of thought that is correlated with a behavior. And if you engage in the compulsion, the stress of the thought reduces. So that's really what OCD is. It's like engaging in behaviors that in a bizarre way reduce your mental stress or the tension in your mind. So this is where, a lot of people may be asking, okay, so like what's the difference between a behavioral addiction and OCD? And this is where I'm going to introduce a term called ego syntonic or ego dystonic. So these are clinical terms that sort of psychiatrists will use to differentiate like different kinds of diseases. And so this is going to also be useful for a question that we have later. But ego syntonic are things that align with you. So it's like you have a thought and that like kind of aligns with who you are as a person and you think that thought is okay. You think the thought is good. Ego dystonic are thoughts that don't align with you. So these are things that you recognize are like irrational or you dislike, but you can't help but thinking them. Okay? So these don't necessarily have to be good thoughts or bad thoughts. It's about alignment between the thought and you. So for example, in someone who is suffering from a really bad depression, let's say, and is suicidal, that person's thoughts of suicide are actually ego syntonic. So they think that they don't deserve to be alive. They don't think that they're good people. So thoughts of suicide actually like align with their perspective of themselves. Another example of this is like, sometimes I worked with someone who had OCD who would have intrusive, like violent thoughts. So this is an example where like they recognize that the violent thoughts are like not what they want. Like they're disgusted by them. They dislike them. But the thoughts kind of keep popping up anyway. So there is a misalignment between your thoughts and like basically like your personality or your beliefs. So OCD tends to oftentimes be ego dystonic. So the person with OCD recognizes that this is like kind of bizarre and crazy. And if you kind of look at this person's post, they recognize that, oh, I'm not like doing it for any particular reason. It feels a little bit like ego dystonic, like they're not doing it because they think it's a good idea. Whereas if you look at someone, so this post kind of talks about lying is almost a little bit ego dystonic, but this is where you should really talk to a clinician who can help you tease apart which one it is. I don't have enough information to label it. Whereas if you look at someone who's like sociopathic and they lie, their lies are very egocentric. Like they don't think there's a problem with lying, right? They may say like theoretically, yeah, there's like a moral issue, like yeah, I sort of get that, but I'm going to go ahead and lie anyway. And also in cases of behavioral addictions, oftentimes these thoughts are egocentric. So if you look at people who have addictions, like you can give them evidence why they shouldn't drink alcohol or play video games or like vape or whatever. But internally, like they may be able to acknowledge intellectually that these things are bad, but generally speaking, their behaviors are going to be a lot more egocentric, right? It's sort of like an academic or logical, like, yeah, it's like bad, but I'm going to do it anyway. So they don't really oppose the thoughts when they come. So thinking about egocentric and dystonic is one way that I sort of think a little bit about, like, addiction versus OCD. It's also a very good way of sort of figuring out, because most people who have ego dystonic thoughts, I think that that's more common in things like OCD or other kinds of like intrusive thoughts or things like that. Ego dystonic thoughts can also be non-clinical in nature. So a good example of this is someone who has like homosexual thoughts, who grows up in a very like homophobic society, right? So like I saw this a lot in East Texas. A friend of mine, I suspect, maybe even committed suicide because he was homosexual, and we grew up in a culture at a time that like that really wasn't okay. And so like those thoughts can be very, very ego dystonic, because there's a clash between your internal thoughts and like what society kind of conditions you to feel. So hopefully that's kind of useful in terms of helping y'all kind of think through things. Just to kind of summarize, sometimes, we lie out of a sense of control. I do think that lying to control the reactions of other people or hiding our shame is one of the things that really keeps us stuck. I do think that living a truthful life can be hard in the short term, but is one of the best things that you can do long term. I try my level best to not lie for, weeks or months at a time. And I found it's like really helped me a lot. So I think it like helps me own up to the mistakes that I make and things like that. And it tends to, even when you make mistakes, like there are consequences to them. But I think generally speaking, like people tend to be pretty open to you making mistakes as long as you kind of own up to it. And so that's kind of the non-clinical perspective on lying. If you're trying to stop that kind of lying, you really have to stop and think a little bit about, what am I trying to control? Why is it so unacceptable to me that I have to like control these things? Like, why am I afraid of the consequences? That's something that you can absolutely work with a therapist or a coach. But then if you're kind of getting into the other stuff, if we're talking about behavioral addictions or OCD or things like that, then you should definitely be seeing a therapist. Generally speaking, if y'all find yourselves compulsive lying, I would highly, highly recommend that you go get an evaluation to see if there is something going on. Because if these thoughts are really bothering you, the good news is that oftentimes there's like treatment for it, right? So you can go see a therapist or even start medication like 6 months from now. The problem could be substantially better or even completely gone. And this is the big thing that people don't understand about mental health treatment, is like a lot of people will live with social anxiety every day. They'll live with phobias every day. They'll live with like agoraphobia and not want to leave the house. They'll live with intrusive thoughts that really torture them. And until you go see like a mental health provider, like these people don't realize that you can like literally fix that, right? It's kind of like if I break my leg and it doesn't dawn on me that like, oh, I can actually like, get a cast and then I'll be able to walk normally again. People are just walking around with like broken legs, and these are things that can be helped by a mental health professional. So it's absolutely something that a therapist can help you with. I think if you're in this situation, I would definitely lean more towards therapist as opposed to coach. At the same time, if you guys are sort of figuring out that like, okay, I don't think that it's an addiction, I don't think it's OCD, and I really want to just like understand my shame and stuff like that, that's something a coach can handle. And the last thing is, if you guys really want to understand like lying and truthfulness from kind of like a building your life in a positive direction perspective, in almost like what I would call like a gaining spiritual strength perspective. And this isn't about like chi or like, meridians or any of that stuff. It's just like kind of what I was saying, that is you start to live a truthful life, like things just get easier for you. I would definitely check out Dr. K's guide. Any questions? Dr. K, what is your definition of lies? Something that isn't the truth. Speaking something that isn't the truth. Okay, so this is a good question. Momo CN asks, how do you even know you're in a position that needs a therapist? So you guys need to understand this, okay? It's not your job to know whether you need a therapist. It is the therapist's job to make a clinical determination about whether you need treatment. So people think about needing a therapist as treatment, but the first job of a therapist is evaluation, right? It's not your job. Like half of medical school is learning diagnosis. It's not even like about treatment, right? So when you say, how do you even know you're in a position that needs a therapist? You don't know that you're in a position. That's the job of the therapist, is to figure it out, because they're the ones who have been trained in like clinical diagnosis. So that's why I generally say, I'd say that like everyone, even if you're healthy, you should like go see a primary care physician or a psychiatrist or a therapist once and just tell them, hey, here's what's up with me. Like, do you think there's like any stuff here that you could help me with? Right? Like you owe it to yourself to get an evaluation. Like we do this in physical health. We have annual physicals, right? I think one of the biggest problems in society is that we don't have like annual mentals, like whatever that would be, like annual mental exams. Increasingly, if you look at what's happening in our society right now, physical health is not the major cause of problems in our society. And yet, we have a medical system that emphasizes preventive care and annual physical exams. But we don't have a society that emphasizes preventive mental health care and like annual mental exams, which is like absolutely what I would do. Like if I was in charge, what I would say is everyone needs an annual mental exam and just get you checked out for like, are you burnt out, right? Like, or do you feel like some amount of existential dread? Are you like unmotivated and don't know what to do with your life? And so this is something that it's unfortunate because we as people like have to fix this on our own because society isn't going to help us do it. But if you look at like most of what the problems that people face, right, they're mental now. So if you look at, we have video game addiction rates that are climbing, suicide is still really bad, depression and anxiety are on the rise, mental health has now surpassed cardiovascular disease and cancer in terms of like highest cause of morbidity and mortality, like when combined together. So it is the most expensive cost to our society. It's like mental illness does more damage to our society than cardiovascular disease does and cancer does. So it used to be that cardiovascular disease and cancer were number one and number two. Now mental health is at the top. So I think we absolutely need like annual mental exams. And this is where, you know, even if you don't get an annual one, I would say go get one once. Go talk to your primary care physician and say, hey, here are the things that I'm dealing with. Like, what do you think about that, right? Be preventive. Be proactive. Go ahead and take care of it now. It's not that you need to see a therapist when you're sick. That maybe used to be true when people were like mentally speaking better, or when the concerns that people had were like more like physical in nature. So my grandmother, for example, grew up in India like, 80 years ago. And back then, like infant mortality was like 20%. So she had like, she was like impoverished. Like there was rationing and they couldn't afford sugar and things like that. And so I'm sure that has a mental toll too. And I'm sure that was, bad. But, they're more concerned about things like infection and dying from childbirth. And so nowadays, like what we have to understand is like millennials and Gen Z is if you like look at, social media, it's like despair is our biggest enemy. So we need to start having, annual mental exams. I'm not saying we should stop doing annual physicals, but as a society, we need to understand that the game has changed, and each and every one of you should go like see a therapist once, because chances are, like even if there's nothing wrong with you, that doesn't mean that they can't help, right? It's also about optimizing your performance. This is part of the reason that we kind of went the coaching route, because what we realized is like in this community, there's some of y'all where there's like something quote unquote wrong with you, but just about everyone can get some benefit from like optimizing their performance, which is, it's kind of maybe top of mind for me right now, because there are a lot of people in the world, like for example, what I'm doing right now has something to do with, people who are doing awesome, like they're doing great. And at the same time, like there's still a lot that you can do, even if you're like already objectively doing very, very well, right? When you have an expert kind of come in and share some ideas with you and like, give you their perspective, like you can, like they can even help. And so if you guys are interested not just in sort of fixing what's wrong, but like optimizing your performance, then I'd highly, highly recommend coaching. Other questions? Oh, is there a problem with streaming? Okay. Click to reply. Chat paused due to scroll. Okay, my chat is lagging. I can't read it, chat. Streamlags. Streamlags. It's now Streamlags. There we go. This is weird. Okay. I can't see anything that y'all are saying. My Streamlabs is buggy. I can't read the chat. Okay, hold on. Let me try to do this. Maybe this will work. Oh. Nope, can't read it. It's too small. Did I restart stream? Chat pause due to scroll testing. Oh, there we go. 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 It worked. It worked. Thanks for the gifted subs, Zero Une. Dude, Zero Une is like 10-time poggers. Yeah, so do OCD thoughts cause cognitive load on the brain so a person can't focus on their tasks or focus on anything? Absolutely. Dude, like absolutely. So this is the thing. So remember that we'll talk about this in a second too. So you remember the sign of mental illness is actually like impairment of function. So remember that like this is what's kind of interesting about mental illness is like sadness is normal, right? But like whether you have sadness or depression depends on whether your function is impaired. And this is where, for example, I think that ADHD is the most overdiagnosed and underdiagnosed illness. Because a lot of people will miss ADHD or will automatically like diagnose people with ADHD. So you'll have people who have super high IQ who have like learned how to adapt to their ADHD and they'll never get diagnosed. Because even though it's 10 times harder for them to like do well in school, like they'll still get B's. Whereas really they could be like sitting there with a 4.0. And on the flip side, sometimes people will come in and they'll say, I have trouble concentrating because, you know, if I sit down to study, I keep on thinking about some kind of intrusive thought that could be OCD. And so they get diagnosed with ADHD because they show up and they say, oh, I'm having trouble concentrating. My mind keeps on getting distracted. I keep on thinking about washing my hands, right? And so people will be like, oh, you're having trouble getting seeing, you know, concentrating on your schoolwork, like you must have ADHD. And so OCD thoughts can absolutely cause a cognitive load on the brain, and they can absolutely interfere with focus. It's a very, very common presentation of OCD. Like the thoughts are so strong that you just can't like think like normal thoughts. Like you can't work normally. So I'm kind of curious. Someone's asking, what if you're someone who compulsively lies to himself? Well, then I'm curious, like what kind of lies are you telling yourself and what does it do for you? Oh my God, more subs. Thanks, Zero Une. So yeah, this is where, you know, if they're random thoughts, is it still OCD? Probably not. So this is like the key thing, right? So OCD tends to be consistent. So they tend to be like recurrent obsessions. They don't tend to be random in nature. Whereas like if you have random thoughts that are interrupting you, like that's more likely to be ADHD. But this is exactly why you guys should go see a professional, because they can help you tease these things apart. Okay? I think I might need to see a therapist. Yeah, I think you may need to. Okay? All right, let's move on to the next post. Okay. So you guys remember we talked about like, okay, well, I'll show you. All right, how do you stop being racist? I'm 18-year-old male in Pinoy living in Seattle. I wasn't racist until 3 months ago when I started to get a sense of racial hierarchy. It's basically all the stereotypes. It's some kind of internal evil that came forward or brainwashing I picked up from the media I consume. I feel like I can't trust people unless they're Asian, and I have an obsession with Asian superiority. I've spent months binge reading and binge watching YouTube channels about how race isn't real, and I know it's wrong to be racist logically speaking, but can't make myself fully believe it. Okay, let's pause here already, okay? So we just talked for a second about ego syntonic and ego dystonic, okay? So as a reminder, ego syntonic thoughts are thoughts that like enter your mind and align with who you are. And ego dystonic thoughts are ones that enter your mind and like don't align with who you are. So if we think about someone, and remember, they're not necessarily good or bad, right? So you can have good ego syntonic thoughts or you can have bad ego syntonic thoughts. So people who are like actually racist generally speaking, will have racist thoughts that are ego-syntonic. So they'll say to people like, oh, like these immigrants should leave my country. Immigrants are bad. They're nasty, whatever. They're lazy, like whatever. So like someone is happy to have those thoughts. They think those thoughts are correct. They love to share them with the world. They think that they like kind of align with things, right? So what we're seeing here are ego-dystonic racist thoughts. So this person like recognizes they have these thoughts and they're like trying to brainwash themselves. Something happened 3 months ago where they kind of like, started having like these racist thoughts. And now they're trying to like brainwash themselves in the opposite direction. So that's very ego-dystonic. Okay? So it's sort of like, I recognize these thoughts are wrong, so let me try to fix them. So if you're trying, if you don't like the thoughts that you're having, they're ego-dystonic. So let's keep going. Okay? So I start to doubt content creators and get suspicious about their intentions if they aren't Asian. I get so uncomfortable that I have to watch something else at the same time while I just listen if I care about their opinion. I feel like the more I try to desensitize myself to non-Asian people, the more uncomfortable I get, right? So this is where, do you guys see like the ego dystonicness here? There's like, they're trying to fix it, but the more they expose themselves to non-Asian people, the more uncomfortable they get. So I'm going to go ahead. So there's some stuff here about like, I'm worried that I'll become violent, lose control, and commit hate crimes. I'm afraid to go outdoors because I might snap. I was going to go to college and get a job, but I canceled it all and did nothing with my life because I didn't feel well. So we're going to go ahead and pause here for a second too. So this is definitely a case where like if y'all are in this situation, I would highly, highly recommend a mental health evaluation. So here's the key thing to remember. Mental health evaluations are not necessarily about whether you're ill or not ill. I know that sounds kind of weird because we're talking about mental health evaluations, right? So I think the main thing to remember is that if whatever is going on is impairing your function and preventing you from living the life that you want, you should go get evaluated by a mental health professional. So this is a case of an 18-year-old person who was going to go to college and now isn't going to college. That's the kind of thing that we call in the field of psychiatry impairment of function. So this it's not an issue of like whether you actually have a neurochemical imbalance or not. That's not really kind of like what we're talking about here. It could be, it couldn't be. But my point is that if your life is so severely impacted by this stuff, whether you have a real diagnosis or don't have a real diagnosis, that's irrelevant. Like the main thing is that you want to live a particular life and something is going on inside your mind that is preventing you from living this life. So if y'all meet that kind of criteria, you should definitely go and see a mental health professional. Does that make sense? So it's really about impairment of function, because I want y'all to think about mental health professionals as like, they're not just about treating the sick, okay? Mental health professionals are a resource for you to utilize to build the life that you want. That's why we're here. We're a tool in your toolbox, right? It's kind of like half of y'all are running around with like debuffs at half HP, and you keep on wiping when you zone in. It's like this person trying to zone into college, and they've got like 20% HP and like I'll have all these stacking concentration debuffs. Minus 50% to concentration. Mana pool is cut in half, and you're zoning in and you're wiping. So if that's the case, like if y'all are zoning in and wiping and you're not able to like live the life that you want to live, go get evaluated by a mental health professional. Does that make sense? Yeah, so this is where thank you very much, Bay Harbor Butcher, for sharing that, many individual therapists and community clinics offer sliding scale payment based on income. So be careful, okay, chat? So here's a common thing that happens. Your mind, if you have some kind of subconscious resistance or stigma, which you may have been conditioned to seeing a mental health professional, right? Because we've all been stigmatized against mental health. Our entire society is like conditioned against seeking mental health treatment, because it's like, oh, like you have to be ill, right? Like crazy people go see therapists. Then what happens is you may not even be aware of those thoughts consciously, but once you're subconsciously conditioned towards something, what the conscious mind does is finds an excuse. So like a really, really common thing that I see is that people are like afraid or ashamed to go see a mental health professional. And like instead of like recognizing that, what they'll do is cite financial concerns. So they'll say like, oh, like I can't afford it or it's too expensive. Whereas the truth is, like this person said, many individual therapists will have like a sliding scale. So they'll basically ask like, what can you afford? So here, just so you guys know, between 20 and 70% of my practice at any given time is like free, right? So there's some months where like literally 70% of the people that I worked with, like I wasn't charging a dime. It's hard to financially sustain that. So at other points, it's like, been closer to 20%, 30% kind of thing. The second thing to consider is that there are a couple of resources out there, like mental health centers, like community mental health centers, that oftentimes will help you find like free treatment. So the government will actually like pay them to give you services. So they don't actually ask you for money. Like they're like the government has like had some kind of grants and things like that. It also varies depending on where you are. I'm talking about the U.S. So if you're in a country like Canada or like parts of Europe and stuff like that, a lot of them will see people for it's all socialized medicine anyway. The the other things to consider is that there are independent organizations that will support mental health treatment. So the Open Path Collective is a good resource, I think primarily in the United States, where these are clinicians that devote a certain amount of hours for like reduced fee therapy. So like they're just people who said like, okay, I'm going to see 3 people a week at $30 a week. So the most that any clinician on Open Path can charge is $60. So the Open Path Collective is like a good way that therapists have kind of like given you a one-stop shop to kind of find cheap therapy. I mean, the therapy isn't cheap. It's high quality because these people have other practices. It's just that thankfully, like a lot of people who are therapists are like in it to help people, right? And we all recognize that not everyone can afford our services. So we just like reduce our fee or even do it for free. You also have organizations like RAD, Rise Above the Disorder. So this is a fantastic organization that supports gamers and can provide grants for mental health services. If y'all are in like Southeast Asia or Africa or South America, unfortunately, I don't know of any like centralized resources that can kind of give you low cost therapy. But I have heard, and I have some colleagues, for example, like some professional colleagues who, will take like 10%, 20% of their practice will be at reduced fee or, like even free. And what I tend to do is like when I think about how to take someone who's got a reduced fee or not, what I really think about is a therapist is like, can I help this person, and like does this person like need help? And if I feel like engaged by like wanting to help them, then I'll find a way to make it work financially. That's how I wound up at 70% at one point, right? Because I didn't want to turn people away because that's not what therapists are about, hopefully. So it doesn't hurt to ask. And don't let your mind trick you into thinking like, oh, I can't afford it, so I'm not going to bother calling, right? That's a very dangerous game you're playing. Just think about that, right? The chances are going to be low, so I'm not even going to bother trying. Like that's how you take a 50% chance and reduce it to a 0% chance. Gamers are really bizarre. And not even gamers, but gamers especially, where like you guys will choose 0% chance over 50% chance any day of the week. It's tricky. Oh, like if I ask them if they'll see me at a reduced fee, they might say no. So I'm not going to call. It's like, wait a second, hold on. You had a 25% chance of success there and you just reduced it to 0%. It's whack. So be careful about what your mind is telling you to do and try to think a little bit about like if you're actually doing something that isn't good for you, like what's that being driven by, right? Stop feeding Indeed. Yeah, so Virtue 720 says, like approaching women or men, right? So like approaching, it doesn't have to be like men approaching women. So this happens a lot in romance where like people aren't willing to give it a shot because they think that the other person will reject them. Where it's like you're not even like think about how unfair that is. You're like not even giving the other person and like the opportunity to reject you. And if they do reject you, like just be cool about it and like don't pester them and don't guilt them and don't, try to like emotionally manipulate them. Like let them know how you feel and like be an adult about it. Let someone else know how you feel. Be authentic about it. Be honest about it, and then respect their boundaries. Like that's the right way to approach people that you're romantically interested in. Clean your Steam library or Stream library. Awesome. Gabe, thanks for the 3-month sub. Okay. Next question. I'm not disclosing which country I am in. It is currently, and I ask y'all to respect that for now. We will let you know. We will let you know as soon as we can. Okay? Don't sniff me out. I know y'all can. I'm just asking y'all to respect the privacy of where I am. Can y'all do that for me, chat? Okay. I'll let you guys know. We're going to let y'all know as soon as we can, okay? Hopefully in a few days. Okay. Could a personal coach help me get back on track at school? I'm not sure what scope of issues personal coaches cover, but would they be able to help me get back on track at school? I desperately want to drop out of my university program. However, this isn't really an option available to me at the moment. I keep missing deadlines for assignments, struggle to keep up with studying, and generally lack any motivation to make an effort towards school. Since I can't drop out, I figure the next best thing would be to try to get myself organized and out of this funk. I have ADHD and frequently feel like I need someone to come and babysit me to make sure I don't lie in bed all day. Okay? I need someone to care about the happenings in my life for me because it feels like I sure as fork don't. I also feel unbelievably childish in regards to this matter. I feel like I should be able to just suck it up and get it done. It is also possible that I am burnt out at this point in time. I don't feel like a living person. That is to say that I don't feel like I play an active role in my life, just along for the ride. My expectation or assumption would be that a coach would give me the tools that help me stay organized and improve my work-school life balance regardless of motivation. Help me help myself in becoming a functioning human being instead of a sad sack who lays in bed all day feeling sorry for themselves. As much as I would love to hire a coach to pester me every week, make sure I'm handing in my assignments on time, and make sure that I'm focused on my schoolwork every minute of the day instead of faffing about it, I assume getting a coach to teach me how to achieve these goals independent of their pestering would be much more beneficial for me. Does this sound like something a coach could help me work through? So the answer is absolutely yes. This is something that a coach can help you work through. But this statement is absolutely wrong. My expectation assumption would be that a coach would give me tools to help me stay organized. So chat, we're going to ask y'all a question, okay? Let's say I'm this person's coach. So this is like really important to understand about coaching. So a lot of people will come in to coaching and say, I have this goal. Here is my problem. Here is what I need from you, okay? My problem is that I am unmotivated. And I feel like I'm just existing in life, okay? So like if you guys have this problem where like you're in a funk and you think that like you just need to get out of the funk and you have no motivation and you think that you need some kind of like organizational help to fix the problem, to overcome your motivation and act regardless of motivation. That's a very dangerous way of thinking, right? So like let's think about what kind of tools could a coach give you? They could give you like a calendar. Ooh, cool. Let's open up a calendar and let's make a timetable. Like let's figure out what are you gonna do. 8 a.m. every day you're gonna wake up. You're gonna like meal prep on Sundays. Like you're gonna do this. You're gonna do this. You're gonna do this. We're gonna organize your life. You're gonna check in with me once a week. And when I check in with you, I'm gonna like hold you accountable because if you didn't do any of those things, like we'll talk about how you didn't do any of those things, bro. Because a week has gone by and you didn't wake up at all and you didn't study at all. That's what people want from coaching, right? They want to go to a coach and they say like, oh, if I go to a coach, like I'm basically outsourcing the effort. They're going to give me some kind of like organizational tip or some kind of tool, some kind of magic tool that with this tool, you don't even have to overcome your motivational problems, right? It's almost like a late night, like, advertisement for like some special thing. With this special magic bullet, you don't even need motivation. You're going to be successful without motivation. All you need is this 5-star planner, right? You need this. We have a very revolutionary patented planning organizational system that has been proven clinically to work. 4 out of 5 dentists agree this is the right way to plan your life, right? It worked for the dentist, so it'll work for you. So people come in and they say like, oh, coaching will help me with this, right? I need someone to keep me accountable. But here's the problem. You're not living life, you're existing, right? You're just existing. You have no motivation, you're in a funk. You also, like, here's the cycle, like, have ADHD. I don't know if that's treated or not, but motivational problems, by the way, are like a big symptom of ADHD, okay? So you've got ADHD, you go to college, you start to fall into a funk. As you fall into a funk, you kind of get like, wow, that tone is really changing a lot. That's weird. Okay. As you fall into a funk, you start to like feel bad about yourself. You start to lose motivation. As you lose motivation, something interesting happens in your brain. Like when you're not motivated to do something, it kind of like calculates like the success likelihood as being low, and it like further dampens your motivation. You fall into this cycle. Like, I'm not motivated, I fell behind, therefore I'm an idiot. The more that your brain thinks you're an idiot, the more its calculation about motivation is going to go downhill. Because your brain is smart, right? So it like thinks about things this way. It says, okay, like, what's the likelihood that I will succeed? If the likelihood that I will succeed is low, I'm not going to bother. Right? Because your brain is pretty smart. It's evolved to be efficient with its resources. That's like, it's how we work, right? We learn how to be efficient with our resources. And if you think that you are not capable of succeeding, then the amount of effort you would need to succeed is going to feel too high, and you won't even bother, and it'll like crap out your motivation. You'll feel burnt out. So can a coach help you with this? Absolutely. But the first thing that you need to understand is that people will come to coaching and they'll be like, give me a solution. And give me a tip. Give me a trick. Give me a life hack. Because this is what our brain has been conditioned to do, right? Because you have like all these YouTube ads and blogs and things like that are sort of like, oh, like just do this one thing and like you will make $100,000 a day. Like I did it. Look at my car. Look at like this place that I'm filming in that I rented using like I mortgaged my house to rent out this penthouse apartment so it has a really cool view, and like I'm going to look slick and it's going to be great, and I'm going to brag about how much money I made, and all you need to do is give me your money and then you will have the secrets. You'll be able to do it too. You can do it too. I know. I have faith in you. And all you have to do is give me the money. Like you don't have to change anything about yourself. Heaven forbid you have to change yourself. I'm like, all you need is this thing. Like you just need this thing and everything's going to be great. So people come into coaching wanting a magic bullet. But like what the coaches, can they help you? Absolutely. But what they're going to help you with, it has nothing to do with like giving you an organizational plan. You'll get there, by the way, but not at the beginning. Because here's the thing, like what do y'all think this person is going to do if someone gives them an organizational plan? Like, so I can't figure out how to, I think the next best thing would be to get myself organized and out of this funk. Like, this is the problem. You got to get out of the funk, right? I feel like I should be able to just suck it up and get it done. So this is like a sign that you're not being compassionate towards yourself, right? You're blaming yourself for your struggles. As long as like, so now I want you to think about what you're doing here, okay? So like you're trying to do something, and what is the voice in your head telling you? It's telling you that you're an idiot. Like you should be able to suck it up. What's wrong with you, dumbass? Right? Oh, like you're such a child. You're supposed to be an adult. You're in college, but you're acting like a teenager or a 7-year-old. You should be able to do it. So as long as your mind is like mentally beating you up, like it's going to tank your motivation. Do you guys see that? And then what happens is you kind of become a zombie. You're just like, you're not able to play an active role because your mind is telling you don't bother, don't bother. And then you need to help stay organized regardless of motivation. No, man, like what you need is motivation to get organized. I can show up at your house and I can like organize all of your stuff, and I can give you 5 different colored folders for all of your classes. I can set up your Google Calendar for you, and that'll help a little bit. But the key thing is that you have to unlock your motivation, right? So help me help myself becoming a functioning human being instead of a sad sack who lays in bed all day feeling sorry for themselves. How do you think that you are ever going to be successful if this is your problem? If you're a sad sack who lays in bed all day feeling sorry for yourself, that's the first thing that needs to change. So if you look at people who are motivated versus people who are not motivated, like what's the big difference? It's not organization. It's not whatever the dude on the internet is selling you. The big difference is like I don't know, like this sounds really simple to me, but I'm going to say it. So you think about like 10 people, like look at 10 people who are highly, highly motivated and are crushing it at life. And you go ask them, how do you feel about themselves? I can almost guarantee you that not a single one is going to be like, I feel like I'm a waste of space and I'm existing and I'm a sad sack. Right? That's not what they're going to say. That's what needs to change. And coaching can help you with that, right? So here's what a coach is going to do. They're going to model positive self-talk, right? So like the tricky thing is once you learn how to talk to yourself that way, it's like GG. And then people are wondering, like, how do I learn self-talk? So like you've conditioned, your brain has been conditioned to say negative things about you. And so then that's going to be kind of weird because like the coach is going to be empathic. Therapists do this too, okay? We do it, I think, at least we train to do it very intentionally. But so like, as they start to like express empathy towards you, like your brain is going to be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then over time, when I coach people, what tends to happen is like they'll say like, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that, right? So they learn, like you as the client will learn what your coach is doing. You'll like learn how to predict it. You'll learn how to say what they're going to say. And then you're going to start changing the way that you talk to yourself. Because here's the thing, if you just think about this for a second, where does self-respect come from? People will sometimes ask the question, how do I learn self-respect? So let's just think about this. Where does a lack of self-respect come from? Are we born with a lack of self-respect? Like, no, of course not. Right? So we learn to respect ourselves through the way that we're treated, and we also learn to disrespect ourselves through the way that we're treated. If we're emotionally abused, that person is going to beat themselves up too. If we're emotionally like loved, then we're going to like learn how to love ourselves. So how do you learn self-respect? I know this is kind of bizarre. You learn it from other people. Literally. Right? So how do you learn self-respect? You get respected by other people and you're like, oh wow, like that's pretty cool. Like I deserve respect. That's neat. And once you learn that from other people, then you can kind of like, change your own thinking. There's even research that supports this. So there's some evidence that, for example, 50% of people with borderline personality disorder will be in remission or no longer meet criteria for a diagnosis if they are in a stable relationship for 2 years. Just think about that for a second, with no treatment, okay? The research is not huge sample sizes. But there does appear to be evidence that like a lot of people with borderline personality disorder can actually like get better in life if they engage in stable relationships for an extended period of time. It's not 1 year, it's not 18 months. So for 2 years, they need a source of someone who's stable. And remember that the number is also 50%, so like that only works for half of people. But I think it illustrates or reinforces this point that even you can have like a personality disorder and being treated in a particular way consistently over time can change the way that your brain works. So how do you learn self-respect? From other people. And if you're struggling with motivation, it's not about getting organized because your mind is like, oh, like, I don't want to change anything in here. Like, I just need to find some external solution out there. And if I can find that external solution, then like it's easy, like I'm done. I don't have to like stop being motivated. I can just do this thing and it'll fix everything. No, it's going to require hard work, and most of that work is going to be internal. Right? Self-growth and putting your life together is not like an external thing. It's an internal thing. Or at least in my opinion, it starts internally. So by all means, work with a coach if that appeals to you. The other thing is like, I think group coaching is really good for this because in group coaching, when you have low self-esteem and your coach is nice to you, there's going to be a thought in the back of your mind that's going to say to you like, it's their job to be nice to you. You guys get that? So it's completely different when you're in group coaching because when you earn the respect, and they will treat you with compassion and empathy, right? So we'll train them how to do that. They'll like learn how to be active listeners and like empathic as well as authentic. So we don't want them to be polite. We want to train everyone in group to be authentic and compassionate, not polite. So they're going to be like honest with you, but they're going to temper that honesty with compassion. Because honesty without compassion just turns you into an asshole. I don't know if you guys like know anyone who's like, oh yeah, like I'm going to speak my truth. And like they can't handle it, like, because their feelings, like screw their feelings, like I'm going to be, like truth is the greatest ideal. So in the Indian system, in the yogic system of like moral virtues, non-violence is above truthfulness. So all truthfulness should be subject to nonviolence. So you should not be, it's better to be nonviolent and lie as opposed to be truthful and hurt someone. Okay? So kind of going back to group, but like the reason that group is cool is like when you earn the respect of those people, like that voice isn't there. That, oh, it's the coach's job to like treat me with respect. They're getting paid to treat me with respect. They're getting paid to like me. That sinister thought is there in the back of their your mind. And not all coaches like their clients, right? They may even be authentic with you. It may just be like, dude, I don't like you, but I'm gonna try to make this work anyway. It's good. I think it's healthy to be honest with clients, even if you dislike them. So we want our coaches to be like authentic and compassionate too. And so coaching, I think, can absolutely help you. But if y'all are kind of stuck in this situation, I think the key thing to remember is that it's about fixing that internal motivation or fixing that internal sense of shame or that you're a failure or that and stop chasing external solutions. Because as long as you, I mean, I don't think a day planner is going to fix this. It may help, right? There may be things, there's certainly value to those kinds of things. Don't get me wrong. But I think that if you're like a living zombie and you're not motivated, that's what you need to fix. Why are you burnt out? Where did your zest for life go? Right? Maybe you need to mourn a little bit that it's boring. Maybe you need to change your major. There are all kinds of things that you can do to affect your motivation. I don't know if this has been uploaded to YouTube, but a couple weeks ago we did a goal setting and motivation seminar, and remember that intent is 1/3 of the equation, right? So working on that intent can be really helpful. Questions? Someone's asking a random question about I'm being screened for autism. Should I do anything to prepare? No. You don't have to prepare at all. It's their job they'll tell you what you need to do. Okay. But Dr. K, is getting a job that is making me feel life is meaningless and there is no point, all my time is going to help a place that have nothing to do with myself? Yeah, so I can understand if you don't want to get a meaningless job, but remember that life is a series of stepping stones, right? So if you want to build the life that you want to, unless you're super lucky and your karma is fantastic, it's not going to be the first step. So I think a lot of times what happens is when people say this job is worthless and drains my soul, I don't want to do it. The question is, what does that job enable you to do? So I want y'all to understand this. A job can certainly feel so a job can be like shackles or it can be wings. And the difference between whether a job is shackles or wings depends everything on what comes next. So when people enter a dead-end job without any kind of thought or plan about what's coming next, that's when a job is going to be shackles. When a job is a means to an end, then it becomes wings. And there's actually research that shows, let me just think about what references these are. So if you look at references of competing interests in addictions, so there's data that shows that people are willing to put up with suffering for the right reason, right? So thousands of years ago in ancient India, people called this dharma, doing your duty. And duty is the thing that allows you to tolerate the negative parts of life. This is the big revelation of the East. This is what's OP, is that generally speaking, human beings gravitate towards pleasure and shy away from pain, unless they have dharma. So dharma, anytime you have an easy road or a hard road, if you're aligned with your dharma, you will willingly and be highly motivated to choose the easy road, right? So there's a whole lecture about this in Dr. K's guide on the meditation track. But so and this is kind of important. So if you think about things so I used to have 80-hour calls, okay? I'm sorry, not 80-hour calls, 30-hour calls, and I'd work 80 hours a week. And then even I would moonlight a lot. So when I was starting Healthy Gamer and stuff, we needed cash to run the business, okay? So I would basically fund it through extra work. So I'd go and work 24-hour shifts at the hospital. And that was how we paid our bills, right? Because we were putting money into Healthy Gamer. And that's my family needed the money. My wife wanted to go to business school and stuff like that. So you take one for the team and you do it with a smile on your face. Did it suck? Sure. Did I want to hang out on weekends instead of work extra at the hospital? Sure. But you take one for the team because it's for a good cause, right? Taking one for the team can be pretty easy if you believe in the team. So if you guys are finding a dead-end job and you're oh, I don't want this job is boring, the question is what comes next. That's going to determine whether a job is dead-end or not, right? If you have nothing on your resume, and like you need to find some entry level position. Like the question is like 6 months from now, like you're going to apply to other places because then you'll have something on your resume. When you go to work and you hate flipping burgers or whatever, and like you're still going to like try to be the star player, so that way like your manager likes you, and then like when you need a reference, they're going to give you like a glowing reference because you're going to show up for 8 hours anyway. Like you can work, you can put in effort, you can not put in effort. They're not going to pay you more, but you may get a good reference. And then you like move to the next thing, and you move to the next thing, and you move to the next thing. That's how you build the life that you want to. It's not straight from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain. It's like one step at a time. And if you are aware that this step may be tough, but there are other steps down the road that are more aligned with what I want to do, then you can do it. Right? So all the hard things that I've done in life have been made way easier by the knowledge that this is an important step I need to take for like the next thing that I need to do. So you can make a cognitive reframe or a mindset shift, or do some introspection or some planning and really think about all these dead end things that are going on. And you will discover that a lot of them don't need to be dead ends. Some of them can be stepping stones. And once you discover that, like you can show up and it can suck and you can say, yeah, I don't enjoy doing this work, but I'm doing it for a reason. So human beings can survive punishment if they've got a reason. And the problem here is not the punishment itself, but the lack of a reason. We are a generation of people who do not have a reason to get up. Right? We're a whole generation of people who were given this promise of a bright future, right? Because it's what the boomers had. They were like, go to college. You know, you can afford a house and 2 kids with a single parent who's got a bachelor's degree. That was the formula that we were sold. And it's like, between the two of y'all, you can have weekends off. One person doesn't have to work, and it'll be good. You know, you're Gucci. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Do what we tell you to do. And then the world like changed, right? So student loans like increased, like people figured out, oh, everyone wants to go to college because college is the answer. So colleges were like, sweet. And then the federal government, at least in the United States, was like, yeah, like anyone can get a loan to go to college. And so then colleges were like, cool, we've got 18-year-old kids who have no understanding of debt. Let's increase prices by like 10% a year over like 30 years. And then the job market changed. Like people stopped, teaching skills that are necessary for work. Like now you can get hired to do programming without a college degree. I think like Google, for example, doesn't require a bachelor's degree anymore. And so like we were sold something that turned out to be a lie. Now, I don't think it was sold to us intentionally as a lie. There are a lot of people that sold us little lies along the way. But I don't blame the boomer generation. That was how the world worked back then. And so we're a generation of people who lacks a motivation and lacks a purpose. And so I'm not saying that you guys should just like go and mindlessly slave away in like, some warehouse somewhere, but recognize that you got to like do some boring stuff to like get to where you want to go. My first job as a research assistant was cool in a lot of ways, but I didn't enjoy it. But it was a stepping stone. So you got to like take the steps to where you want to go and spend some time thinking about it and recognize that you don't have to do everything, doesn't have to be gratifying all at once. This is a journey that's going to last years. So take it slow. And if the beginning is like, if you're out of shape at the beginning, like no big deal. Like people who stop going to the gym because they're out of shape, right? You go to the gym, you're like, I'm so out of shape. And then you don't feel like going. Recognize that being out of shape is the first step to getting in shape. Taking that dead end job is the first step to getting a better job or a job after that. And then even then, like, I think there's a lot of stuff about, jobs that I don't think is great. Like you don't even necessarily need a job. I think there's a lot that's going on with how you can earn income and support yourself without necessarily having a job. So I think there are a lot of advantages we have too. Just a quick, tangent on that. So we live in a very interesting generation because institutions are breaking down. Like the way that like things used to go to market used to be like very institutional. So for example, like if you wanted to be an artist, you had to sign with a record label. If you wanted to like create video games, like you had to work for a video game company, right? Like because you had brick and mortar stores that had publishers. And if the publisher didn't think that your game was going to sell in every single like Toys R Us across the United States, they would not publish it. But now what's happening is like barriers to publication are decreasing. You can self-publish a book if you want to. You can like make music and upload it to SoundCloud or Spotify. You can make a video game and like try to get it greenlit on Steam, right? So there are a lot of like things that are advantageous to us right now. Another good example is like Twitch streaming. To be a celebrity, it used to be that you like needed connections. Like you can't just show up and say like give yourself to the world and become a celebrity. But that's what happens with some Twitch streamers, right? Or most of them actually. Like they just show up and like they have what they have, they offer what they have to give, and some people really like it, and then they practice it and they refine it and they grow over time. That didn't used to be possible. You know, like you look at all this like, you know, Epstein business, like that used to be the only way to get famous. And thankfully we live in a world that hopefully is changing in that regard, where like the distance between you and the market is the smallest that it's ever been. So even if you have to get a dead-end job and you really love something else, I would encourage you to get the dead-end job to pay your bills, and then like every morning before you go to work, spend an hour or two thinking about how you're going to leave this job. What's next? And do you need this job to support you so that like, you know, you're paying your own bills while you work on your craft? You know, I'm reminded of Brandon Sanderson, who got a job as a hotel night manager. And why did he get that job? It's because like hotel nights, like they had to pay someone to be there. It was minimum wage and it sucked. Occasionally he'd have to do some work, but he could basically man the desk and like write his stories, right? So I think it was like a really great move for him. And then he published something, and then he stopped being a hotel night manager. I think if you look at someone like Brandon Sanderson, I don't think, you know, that's a dead-end job for him. But you can use a dead-end job to your benefit. And that's how you kind of like get a job. You know, you have to think about what you want from life and how this fits into it. Another common example is when students work at libraries. So if you're like man a desk, like you can study while you're working at a library. So I, for example, my first job was working at Marble Slab, and I was like 16 years old. And I chose the morning shift. And the reason that I chose the morning shift is I realized if I got all my work done quickly, if I was super efficient in the morning, I had like 4 hours of crap to do. If I optimized that process that like other 16-year-olds like didn't give a crap about, I could get my work done in an hour and a half, and I could do whatever I want with the rest of the time. So it was great, right? So I like make all the ice cream in the morning, and then I kind of just chill. It was like super slow. Like who goes and gets ice cream at like 10 in the morning? No one. So then I could do what I want. I was 16 at the time, so I would just read fantasy novels. But, you know. Anyway. Okay. What builds mental strength? Practice. I'd say practice and awareness. Those are the two things that build mental strength. Right? You have to watch yourself when you feel weak and ask yourself, where does the weakness come from? And watch yourself when you feel strong and ask yourself, where does the strength come from? I've read a lot of Brandon Sanderson's books. Meditation tips for ADHD minds? Absolutely. So if you have an ADHD mind, you need to have a meditation technique that has your mind move around a lot. That's what you need. So like that's where we do the rotating sound awareness meditation. This is the thing where you try to listen to as many sounds as you can and as rapidly as you can. Another example is go look at a tree, and one at a time try to look at each leaf on the tree as quickly as possible. Spend a moment to acknowledge each leaf on a tree. And move it. Move it as quickly as you can from one leaf to the next. That's our meditation for the day. And then when your mind is super, super exhausted, then try any other meditation. And it'll go really, really easy for you. Because your mind will be done moving around. It's going to be like, oh, no more moving around. Let me just relax. Let me stop. Just stop. And if you just stop doing the practice and close your eyes, you take a deep breath, your mind will be like completely empty. Because it'll be like, oh my God, that was terrible. You made me run too fast. So it's kind of like, how do you get, you know, a kid to sit down? You have them run around in circles for a while, and then they'll sit down on their own. Then you get to the no mind state. Easy chat. People are asking, someone's asking about, are you familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh, and do you think he's a good resource for learning meditation? Absolutely. So I think Thich Nhat Hanh is great. I think that Thich Nhat Hanh has the same problem that most of the other meditation teachers have, which is that they teach their tradition. So I'm of the belief that part of the reason, so one of my teachers taught me this, I thought it was a pretty cool answer. Part of the reason that there are so many traditions on meditation and different teachers is because all meditations don't work for all people. That much like food preferences or anything else in the world, there's a variation between people. And because there is a variation, there is an ideal technique for like different people. And so that's sort of why I think the biggest problem that I see with meditation from very knowledgeable teachers is that they study their technique, right? It's kind of like saying like, should you learn how to play video games from a Fortnite player or a Dota player? And the answer is like, my answer is like, if you learn from a Dota player, they're going to teach you Dota. If you learn from a Fortnite player, they're going to teach you Fortnite. And which ones, like, who should you like? And then people ask me like, do you think learning from this Fortnite player is a good idea? And it's like, that depends. Do you want to play Fortnite? And so part of what my approach to meditation is, and this is where like, I studied a lot of different traditions because none of them felt perfect for me, which is part of the reason I didn't become a monk. It was like, I don't know, this feels incomplete. And then I went and studied with someone else, and then went and studied with someone else, and then went and studied with someone else. And then I kind of realized, oh, like the reason that there are so many people is because not one meditation technique works for everyone. Case in point, someone was asking about ADHD. There's a technique for that. Whereas in my experience, if you look at people who are trained in one lineage, they won't have quite as personalized of meditation approaches. Even people who claimed that their techniques were personalized. So transcendental meditation is a really good example of this, where Maharishi Mahesh Yogi at some point was like saying that I'm going to give each and every person a personal mantra. And then he taught it to like, I think his mantras were probably personal, but then he taught a bunch of meditation teachers who then went to all corners of the globe and taught their own personalized meditation techniques, which turned out to be like a chart based on age and gender. And then like you just figure out which one it is. It's in a sense it's personalized because there's a different mantra for different people, and so there's some specificity there. But I think it like, and then they kind of got in trouble. Like there was some bad press around like people sort of found the chart and they're like, hey, this is like, you guys are saying this is personalized, but you're just basically giving this to every other 41-year-old male out there. So I think that personalized meditation is a good idea. And so you should actually learn from lots of different teachers. And this is really important because if you say, if I say that, oh, Thich Nhat Hanh is a great teacher, you should learn from Thich Nhat Hanh. The problem that I see a lot in meditation is people will go to Thich Nhat Hanh, they'll try to learn. A lot of people will love him because he's a fantastic meditation teacher. But some people will be like, oh, like, I'm not getting this. And then this is really important. Then what they'll think is the problem is in me, not in Thich Nhat Hanh. That's really dangerous thinking, because then you're saying like, oh, I'm not good at meditation, right? No, I think that's a very devastating conclusion to come to. So remember that when you have a teacher and you have a student, and the student isn't learning, like whose fault is that? It's actually the teacher's fault, not the student's fault. But somewhere along the way in the tradition of meditation, like with the propulsion of like all of these like meditation apps and like teachers and stuff like that, everyone's like, oh, super into meditation. Meditation is great. Meditation. Dr. K is like talking about how awesome meditation is. Then you go and you try to learn it and it like doesn't work for you, and then you feel like an idiot. That's not your fault. It's the teacher's fault, right? Because the teacher is the one who has the responsibility of teaching you the meditation that's going to work for you. And so keep looking for a teacher that until you find one that like really jives with you. Any tips on having the dream? It feels like whatever passions I had, they're all past me already, and I don't feel as good about them. Yeah. So the dream is not about achieving things; it's about perspective. There's actually research on this. That like if you chase a desire, the yogis. So the Yale University I think has a course on happiness that's very good. I recommend you all check it out. I think the professor does a very good job at outlining some of the research on happiness. But people think about the dream as achievement. You don't live the dream through achievement. You live the dream through perspective. So when you detach yourself from the outcomes of your actions, you learn how to live in the present. And that's when you'll start living the dream. So living the dream is about internal satisfaction. It's not about external achievement. And this is where, like, I've worked with a lot of people who have a lot of external achievement, and they're not happy, and they come to me and they say, Dr. K, I'm not happy because I've achieved so much, but I'm still not happy. I'm the CEO of a company, and we just got acquired, and I'm getting a huge payout, and I don't know what to do with myself. I'm unhappy. And that's where, like, you begin to realize, like, oh, like, happiness, like, there's a science to happiness, and happiness is about mindset, not about achievement. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't achieve. There are lots of values to achieving, too. So by all means, strive for achievement, but recognize that whether you win or you lose, you can sort of be, like, content or happy either way. And I know that sounds very bizarre to people, but I encourage you to actually, like, think about it for a second, right? Take your favorite video game and ask yourself, every time I win the video game, am I happy? Every time I lose the video game, am I unhappy? And what you will discover is there may be a correlation, like maybe you're more likely to be happy when you win and less likely to be happy when you lose. But you will find that there are some games that you win where you're not happy and you still feel like angry and tilted. Or some games where you lose and you'll be content because you're like, you know what? I played a good game. We lost. And just think about that. What's the difference there? It's about perspective. It's about I played a good game. Right? Like, I really played awesome. It's a pity we lost. Like, I had a team full of noobs. But, man, I was dumpstering on noobs right and left. That felt great. You know, I was styling all these crappies out there. And so it's all about attitude and expectation. And so as you let go of expectation, as you start learning how to appreciate things in the moment, then you will be closer and closer to the dream. And what Buddha essentially discovered is, like, enlightenment is like permanently living the dream. That's what it is, right? And Buddha figured out that has nothing to do. He was a king. He was rich and powerful and had everything. And he figured out that living the dream actually has nothing to do with that stuff. Now, the Yale course on happiness will disagree with that a little bit, because they'll say that, monetary income does correlate with happiness up until a certain point. 80K, 100K, maybe 120K now. So, science, temper that with science, by all means. Yeah, so I hope that helps. If your passions are behind you and you don't feel as good about them, like, that's exactly the point, right? So, like, if you don't feel as good about your passions anymore, that's because what the yogis discovered is that chasing your passions only leads to temporary satisfaction. That, like, you can eat a burger today and absolutely love it, but that will not change, or it may even adversely affect your desire tomorrow. That the satisfaction of eating a burger or eating a cookie is temporary by nature. And that the only kind of permanent enjoyment actually has to do with, like, internal attitude and detachment. Right? When you're like, let's see what I eat today. Like, let's try to appreciate it. And you kind of do that. Like, you'll find that you can actually control your enjoyment of things based on your mental attitude. Okay. That makes sense? Questions about that? Are there good scientific studies on enlightenment? No. What there are, though, are, like, some studies on potentially the neuroscience of detachment, but not on enlightenment. So mindfulness is a practice that is like a subset of, like, what I would call meditation. If y'all are curious about what role mindfulness plays in this, then I'd say that y'all should check out Dr. K's Guide to Meditation, because I explain, like, all the different traditions of meditation and all that kind of stuff and where mindfulness fits in. And also, like, earlier when I was talking about, there are a lot of different people were asking about Thich Nhat Hanh. And so what I tried to do in the Guide to Meditation is, like, lay out all of the different, like, dimensions of meditation. And so we have, hopefully this will be coming out in the next, like, in an update, but, like, classifying different kinds of meditations. So, like, each meditation will have different properties. And so do you want a meditation that works for anxiety? Do you want a meditation that's oriented towards depression? Do you want a meditation that focuses the mind? Do you want a meditation that explores? So some people, for example, will meditate easier if they're trying to figure something out. So if I ask them, like, a mystery, I'll ask them, phonetically spell out the sound of the breath. And even someone with ADHD may be able to do that because their mind is like inquisitive and curious, and you give them something to play with, and then they like really, really, really closely focus and like listen very deeply, which is the same result. Or I can tell someone else stare at a candle flame. And the ADHD person may have difficulty doing that because their mind is all over the place. The goal is to bring one pointedness to the mind, however you achieve it. And so that also, all that theory and stuff is explained. Any advice to find out if you're actually happy or not? Because most of the time I don't really know if I'm happy or not. I would say you could try meditation, going on long walks and thinking about it, or talking to someone, right? The ultimate goal is one-pointedness regardless of style? Yes. So this is why I like the kind of like the more yogic system of meditation, because it's like scientific, and they sort of lay out that like, so this is the goal of meditation, is to achieve a no-mind state, but you can't forcibly clear your mind, okay? So this is like going to bed and falling asleep. So you can go to bed, but you can't go to sleep. So the goal of meditation is the easiest way to fall asleep, the easiest way to enter a state of meditation is to have one-pointedness of the mind. And then what happens is once your mind is fixated on one thing for a prolonged period of time, that last thing will melt away. This is a really simple thing to understand. So your mind naturally acclimatizes to any constant stimulus. So when I put on this shirt in the morning, I felt the shirt, right? Like you feel it when you first put it on. And then your brain has a very natural mechanism to extinguish responses that are constant. So when I first put on the headphones, I felt them. And then over time, my brain is starts to ignore them and like empty them from my mind. So when I focus on one thing in meditation, like the breath, focusing on the breath empties all the other thoughts from my mind, and then all I'm left with is the breath. And then naturally, my mind will like get used to the breath, and it'll like forget about that too. And then you're left with a no-mind state. So that's kind of how you go from dharana, which is focus, which is a verb that you do, to dhyan, which is a state of mind. And this is what's really confusing about meditation, is that a lot of people who achieve a state of mind will talk about it, and then people who don't understand that will try to duplicate it. But it's like trying to force yourself to go to sleep. The harder you try, like the worse it gets, right? And then they get really confused and they think, oh, I'm bad at meditation. Because all these people are talking about falling asleep, and I go there and I say, put myself to sleep. Go, sleep, 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 sleep. What's wrong with you, idiot? Sleep, sleep, sleep. And it's like, oh, I'm bad at this. I can't fall asleep. And it's like, that's because you're just doing it wrong, right? No one's taught you how to do it properly. So some of these basics, like I think it's bizarre, but you have a lot of like people teaching meditation, and they don't like teach this very basic thing. Okay. All right, we got to do this one. How do I poop in public? Because of COVID and the prolonged comfort of being able to poop in my own home 24/7, now that I'm back working in person, I'm having trouble pooping at work. If someone else is already in the restroom, I just leave. If someone walks in while I'm doing my business, I often can't finish and end up pinching it off and leaving. Even if I have the restroom to myself, I'll have anxiety about the potential of someone walking in. Does anyone else struggle with this? Got any tips, tricks, meditations? This is one where when I was reading this, I got to scroll down because there's a brilliant. If you lay toilet paper down in the bowl, there's no splash or noise, so you can poop silently. Next level plays, chat. Next level plays. Let me tell you what. This is better. So this is why I love the subreddit, dude. Dude, this is why I love the subreddit. So here's the thing. Dr. K has a lot of answers, but I don't have all the answers, and they're not the best ones, okay? There are some real five heads in our community, and what I love about the subreddit is, like, the five heads have your back. So I had this answer kind of like, oh, like, look at yourself and think about, like, I mean, I think what I say still is valid in the sense that, like, you know, play the tape through to the end is what I would say. When you guys have an anxiety about something, I give you all a technique, which is play the tape through to the end. So let's say that you do, you know, drop a deuce, and there's a splish splosh or a plonk in the pool, and then like what is it that you're worried about, right? Like, so what happens after that? Like, just play the tape through, like, because this is the thing, a lot of fears are nebulous. So fears can be a lot like mirages, where the closer you get to them in your mind, the more they disappear. So like when I talk to people who have like anxieties like this and we kind of like explore their anxieties, what we'll find over time is that like there's like a primal fear, but it's not actually like logical in nature because it's emotion, right? And so the closer you look at it, like the weaker it kind of gets. So I would say play the tape through to the end and then think like, okay, so like, oh, but then they'd hear and then what? You know, like, are they ever going to talk to you about it? No, they're never going to talk to you about it, but they're going to know and they're going to think and they're going to know it was me. And like, how are they going to know it's you? I don't know. They're going to like, look at my shoes. Like, there's someone at your place of work that's looking underneath the stalls to see who's in the stall. Like, what? Right, so as you kind of play the tape through to the end of your anxiety, you'll start to see that there are like weird things that don't really line up. And so eventually when you play the tape through, like essentially what happens is, in my experience, a lot of times the strength of the fear will like diminish the more that you play the tape through to the end. But in some cases, it doesn't work, TBH. And in that case, I'd say like use this 5-head move and just lay some toilet paper in so it doesn't plonk plonk. You know? It's great. It's great. The internet's a wonderful place. Okay. We got time for maybe one more chat. All right. I don't feel enjoyment from video games anymore, and what can I do about it? I never have much of a social life, so I usually spent most of my time playing video games. But it's been about a decade of that, and being the thing that I do in my free time. And what I'm noticing now is I have a mental block when it comes to starting new games and playing one in general. I only manage to play games I get addicted to not I get addicted to not enjoy. For example, CS:GO. It's a time sink that I'm only ever able to play, and at this point, I can only play games for the sake of playing them. So I was just wondering if there was a way for me to not only be able to start games I want to play, but enjoy them too. Absolutely. So this is a really interesting question, okay? So this is a situation where someone's been playing games for 10 years. They also have noticed that the only games that they can play are the ones that they don't enjoy. And they can't even start to play new games because they like don't enjoy it anymore. And they actually like want to learn how to enjoy games again. So we're going to start by sharing 2 or maybe 3 principles of neuroscience, and then we're going to go to some practical advice. So the first principle of neuroscience to understand, or maybe psychology, is that people have done numerous studies on why video games are addictive, okay? And so when I say addictive, what that means is, remember, an addiction is something that reinforces a behavior. And this will get to principle neuroscience too in a second. But why games are addictive is actually the denial of reward. So what makes a game addictive is not winning, but the fact that you don't always win. So part of the reason that battle royales became so addictive, and in some parameters, Fortnite, for example, is the most successful game ever in like some dimension. So if you look at like the rate at which Fortnite dominated the market and how much money they made, how quickly, Fortnite like is number 1 in some parameters. And so why is that? Like, what's the whole thing? Like wouldn't you think, like, don't people like playing video games? But then you have a game like Fortnite where I think you have like 100 players that are competing for one victory spot. And so I think part of what they I don't know that they sort of did this intentionally, but part of the reason why battle royales are so addictive and people play them so much is because of the denial of reward. So the fact that you don't always win actually makes it like far more addicting. So that has nothing to do with fun, and we'll get to that in a second, okay? So the first thing to understand is that the addiction aspect, playing a video game despite not enjoying it and like not being able to quit, despite not having fun, has to do with an addiction. And that has to do with like dopamine and our reinforcement kind of circuitry. So there's the mesolimbic circuit in the brain, which sort of governs this, and the main neurotransmitter is dopamine. And so that's like behavioral reinforcement, and the denial of reward strongly stimulates that system. It's also why gambling is so addictive, because you don't always win, right? So the random reinforcement schedule is more addicting than the consistent reinforcement schedule. The second thing to understand, if it's addictive, why don't I have fun? So the circuits in your brain that involve dopamine reward circuits and behavioral reinforcement are actually separate from the hedonic circuits of the brain. So the reward circuits and the hedonic separates are technically separate. And this is kind of how we understand this, okay? So the hedonic circuits of the brain actually involve like different receptors and even use things like endocannabinoids and like different compounds. So a lot of like pleasure seeking and like pleasure and enjoyment isn't necessarily the dopamine circuit. They're actually discrete circuits. Dopamine's also involved in pleasure because the brain isn't, it's not simple like that. Like there's just circuit 1 and circuit 2. But we do know that the experience of pleasure and the experience of like motivation and reward and behavioral reinforcement are actually somewhat separate. And we know this actually by studying the brains of people with schizophrenia. So what we know in the brains of people with schizophrenia is that like reinforcing behavior is very difficult for them, but their pleasure actually doesn't decrease. So for example, like if someone has bad schizophrenia, it's going to be really hard for them to like cook themselves a meal, but whether they cook it or not, they still enjoy or derive just as much pleasure from it. And so people got pretty confused and they were trying to figure out like if people with schizophrenia are still like getting pleasure out of it, why don't they do it? And this is when they stumbled upon this discovery that hedonics and like motivational drive are actually separate circuits. So I suspect what's going on is that you've got some kind of like problem here in terms of you've got some circuit in your brain that has developed a habit and has almost like an addictive kind of nature to it. And this also goes back to, we had a lecture recently about ADHD and substance use. And remember that like when you start using a substance, there are like different phases of addiction. So in the first phase, it's like stimulates a particular part of brain and you have fun with it. And then as an addiction sets into your brain, it actually travels from more of your like prefrontal cortex and mesolimbic system into your striatum, and it moves to a different part of your brain, and then it becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, the reward, like the pleasure from it, starts to decrease. So we kind of see this a lot in long-term gamers where they're addicted to the game, but they don't even have fun playing it. Like even think about like MOBAs or like CSGO is a really good example of this, where like it's really easy to tilt. Like if you actually, take someone who plays 8 hours of games a day, the amount of positive feeling that they generate from playing the game is actually outweighed by the negative feeling, right? And so there's another kind of principle here where remember that the video game doesn't just give you pleasure, it also takes away pain from other parts of your life. So playing video game, this is something that's pretty consistent, is it kind of numbs out your mind and like protects you against the negative stuff. So those are a couple of interesting neuroscientific principles about, why you can get stuck playing a game and not even enjoy it and not be able to quit. The next thing is kind of naturally becomes, okay, so then what do you do about it? So the simplest way to stop playing games or even start, because this person's question wasn't how do I stop playing games, it's how do I start enjoying them again, is to actually do a dopamine detox. So we have a YouTube video about this, but I think that resetting all of those neurotransmitters and neurochemicals and like the ratio of like receptors to like what's being secreted, I've seen good progress happen in about 2 weeks for most people. So like don't play any video games and ideally steer clear of technology for about 2 weeks. No Reddit, no YouTube or anything like that. Grab a book. Like it helps if you kind of do this over like a vacation or something like that. We've got a whole video about it. But if you engage in a dopamine detox and reset your dopamine circuitry, like if you kind of like abstain from video games or other like short hanging technology for a period of 2 weeks, you will find that you're able to engage in more pleasurable activity and even games will start being fun again. So I noticed that back when I was like addicted to video games, they weren't even fun. And now when I play video games, they're lots of fun. Like I love playing video games. They're so much fun. And I wish I could do it more. But this is the kind of thing where it's sort of like the more you do it, the less pleasurable it becomes, right? So I'd say the fastest way is to dopamine detox. Now, remember that dopamine detoxes, people don't understand this. They don't know what to expect. So the main thing about dopamine detox is to remember that like the main enemy in dopamine detox is going to be boredom. So you will be bored for 2 weeks. And you're like, what you have to survive is like a period of boredom, which sounds terrifying. It's why everyone takes their cell phones to use the bathroom, right? Because like the idea of being bored, even for a brief amount of time and having nothing to do is like oddly terrifying to us. So if you guys want like an easy practice to prep you for a dopamine detox, it's very simple, but it's also kind of hard, but you can do it. is every time you go to the bathroom, don't take your cell phone. Don't take anything to do when you use your bathroom. Just go to the bathroom and just do the bathroom. And if you really think about it, it's like, oh my God, I need the cell phone so bad. But no, you don't. Like, it's going to be, you'll be in there like 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Like, if you're unlucky, like 10 minutes, right? You'll survive. It'll be okay. Right? And so, like, you'll be fine. Like, just go. Like, every time when you do a number 2, like, don't take your cell phone. Just go without it. Easy. That's a good way to prep for a dopamine detox. There's a whole video about how to dopamine detox well. So we kind of go into a lot of details about it. So check that video out on our YouTube channel. Okay? Yeah. So I think dopamine detoxes are hard, but they're very effective. Yeah, as Taldon says, just you and the deuce becoming one. Absolutely. Books okay? No. Books okay during dopamine detox? Yes. During the bathroom meditation? No. No books. Nothing to distract the mind. Be one with the poop. Dr. K, why do you say the quads are the highest producers of testosterone? Aren't they? Am I wrong there? Is there some fitness Chad who wants to prove me incorrect? Last time I checked, and there may be, like, the science may be outdated or I could be incorrect. But I thought the largest producer of endogenous testosterone was the quadriceps muscles. How do you cure book addiction? See, this is sneaky. Mech Warrior 2 is trying to be sneaky. There's the sneaky brain. You guys see that? This is what the sneaky brain does. Mech Warrior 2 is asking you, how do you cure book addiction? Haha, Dr. K, checkmate. You're trying to cure me of my cell phone addiction, but then I will wind up being addicted to books. And if you don't have a good answer for me, then that excuses me from the cell phone addiction. Because if I'm just going to wind up being addicted to books, then there's no point in getting off of cell phones. Haha, Dr. K, checkmate. You see that? So I don't have to give up your cell phone. Because afterward, I will be addicted to books. So be careful about what your mind generates to prevent you from doing something that's good for you. The mind is a sneaky, sneaky bastard. The biggest mistake we make about our minds is that we think our minds are working for us and our happiness. Our mind was not designed to work for us and our happiness. It was designed to survive. So be careful about that. So remember that addictions are not, addiction isn't just something you do every day, right? Addiction is something that, like, involves, like, behavioral circuitry and, like, tension and relief and stuff like that. Here, let me show you guys. Let me see if I can find this paper. Damn it. I had a good paper about addiction. Hold on, chat. Okay. So I'm going to have to get going in a minute because it's quite late. Let me see if I can find... Here we go. So I want you guys, if y'all, this is a great paper on behavioral addictions. Highly recommend it. It's open access. So you guys can check that out. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So when people are saying testes and kidneys are the largest testosterone producers, that's correct. I meant muscle group. So the largest muscle group. So the problem with people who have low endogenous testosterone is that there aren't easy interventions you can do, or at least that I'm aware of, that will cause your testes and kidneys to produce testosterone. Whereas there are actually actions you can take to get muscular production of testosterone up. Yes, you are absolutely correct, though, that testes produces more testosterone than quadriceps. I was referring to, like, actionable things that you can do that will boost your endogenous testosterone. Here, I'll post it again. So that's a good paper on behavioral addiction. It's like a nice narrative review. So SSRI's effect on the reward circuit, that's complicated. It's so complicated. Maybe I'll do a lecture on that. Got a paper on motivation? No. So this is the part of the problem with motivation. So this is what we try to do with our coaches in terms of like how we train them to help y'all with motivation. So there's no Sanskrit word for motivation. Okay, maybe I'm wrong there. I'm not aware of one, and I've asked a lot of people, and no one's been able to give me one. So if you have any Sanskrit scholars out there that want to prove me wrong, please let me know. And I think the reason for that is because motivation is an umbrella term. So what I mean by that is that like motivation encapsulates a lot of other more specific correct terms, right? It's like using the word emotion. Like it's saying like, I feel emotion. And it's like, okay, but like what kind of emotion, right? There's more specificity there. And so like if we look at motivation, and so the way that we work with our coaches is like we try to explain to them that motivation has 3 components, and you can intervene on all 3 of these components. It has intent, resistance, and action. And out of intent, that can just further be subdivided, right? Like, why are you doing this? And then resistance is like you may want to do something, but something gets in the way. So I should study, but instead I play video games. So that's an idea where like you have a particular intent and you have something that causes resistance. So you can work on either of those ends, right? You can clarify your intent and learn how to discover things that you care about instead of what you should do, and that will drive your motivation in the right direction. Or you can reduce resistance. So for example, like if I want to apply for a job, but I'm afraid because, I don't think I'll be a good candidate, then you can work on that emotional fear, lower that resistance, and like it'll result in more action. And then the third dimension is action, where you can literally operationalize problems. It has a lot of stuff to do with frontal lobes and things like that. So there are actually techniques that you can intervene on each of those 3 dimensions. And so that's why I think like I'm sure there are books on motivation, but a lot of times like, people won't write books just on motivation because, there's a lot to it. Like it's more complicated than the word motivation. Utprerit? I don't know what that is. That's interesting. So so utprerit transliterate to English says inspired. I'm not sure if that's actually motivation. So it could be inspiration. Okay. So guys, I gotta run. Everyone, it was nice to see y'all. In terms of meditation for the day, I really do have to go because I have another commitment. But here's what I'll say for meditation. I'm going to give you guys a couple. So someone else is asking about ADHD meditations. So one is the rotating sound awareness meditation, where you go to like a place that's noisy and you listen to as many sounds as you can, as rapidly as you can, without attending to them. And so what I mean by that is that like you're not like, if you hear words, you don't want to listen to the conversation. You just want to acknowledge the words and then move to a different sound stimulus. You can also do this, like I said, the meditation with looking at leaves. So as rapidly as you can, try to see as many leaves as you can one at a time if you have ADHD. Move from one leaf to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. Your mind will start to get distracted. You'll start to think about other thoughts and go back to the leaf that you're supposed to be looking at. So leaf 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I have to do this, blah, 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 blah. Oh, where was I? Okay, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, I have to do this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, where was I? Okay, I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Oh, I have to think about this. Okay, where was I? I don't remember where I was. No problem. Just start over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so each time that your mind wanders and you pull your mind back to the task at hand, you are literally training your attention like a dog on a leash. So the dog runs over there, and then you yank it over here. The dog runs over there, you kind of gently pull it back this way. And over time, the dog will learn, okay, I'm supposed to stay here. So the tricky thing that people don't understand about ADHD and meditation is that the worse you are at meditation and ADHD, the more rapidly you're improving. It's kind of a tricky thing. But remember that meditation is about pulling your attention to where you want it to go. And so the more that it wanders, the more push-ups you're actually doing. You pull it once, you pull it twice, you pull it 3 times. Whereas someone whose mind is naturally able to stay still is not actually going to be improving as rapidly as you're improving. So that's the second meditation. Third meditation is to enjoy the ultimate bliss of using the restroom without any kind of devices or distractions. Okay? Who are you rating today, chat? Who's streaming right now? Tell me. So if you daydream, just come back to the practice, right? It's okay to daydream. Come back to the practice as soon as you're ready. We doing a raid? Absolutely. Is Pooper Noodle? Dude. We can raid Kit Boga. Let's raid Kit Boga. Alright. So send Kit Boga some love. We'll see y'all hopefully on Friday. Oh, you guys want to raid Kit Boga or Pokimane? Tell me quickly, chat. Kit, yes? Yes? Yes, let's do Kit Boga. Okay, take care. Bye.